Well, hello, lovely listeners. Today I have the honor of speaking to author Michael Ruskin. Michael is based in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. I've never been there yet, but I will get there one day. And today's episode is a little bit different. Usually I'm really intrigued to listen to my guests' backstory and how they got to where they got to. And Michael will tell us a little bit about that, but he's more interested in talking about his parents and the book that he's written. And the book is called The Vow, A Love Story and the Holocaust. And the book is all about how two extraordinary people transcended one of the darkest periods of World War II. God, yeah, don't we know it? The Nazi occupation of Lithuania in 1941 to 1945, where nearly 97% of the country's Jewish population perished. Is that true? Wow. At the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators. And considering the odds of their survival, only one can conclude it was only their unwavering love for each other, their faith in God, and their unshakable courage, which made the difference between life and death. I've got goosebumps, wow, reading that. They were truly a miracle couple who deserve to be honored and their legacy preserved. Oh, that's amazing. And welcome, Michael. It's an absolute honor to have you.
Thank you, Mel. I'm glad to be in front of your audience. That's wonderful.
Yeah, you're welcome. You were saying just before I hit record that you are making inroads into lots of countries now with this book, which is fantastic.
Yeah, very excited.
So tell us a little bit about you, Michael, and what actually, a little bit of your backstory, but and then what brought you to want to write this book and obviously get this message. Why is it so important for you to do that?
Sure. Okay, well, everybody knows my name is Michael Ruskin. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I am the youngest of three children. My brother passed away in 2008, and my sister passed away in 1944 during the Nazi occupation of Lithuania. She was only 3.5 years old when she passed. I'm the only native born in my family. My parents came here in 1949. I was raised in New Jersey, which is only about 45 minutes in central Jersey, around 45 minutes from New York City. My background is in psychology and political science. I graduated from college in Ohio, and I spent the last 30 plus years in human resources management, getting involved in management training and doing technical recruiting. I've also written a number of technical papers, memoirs, and short stories. And I also have another business called lifetimestories.net, where I'm actually writing other people's memoirs for their keepsake for their children.
Oh, wow, that's lovely.
Right. So I'm just transferring my book, the knowledge I gained from my book, and now I'm using it to help other people write their stories for their families and their ancestors.
So, quick question for me. By the way, I've got family in Poughkeepsie, so I guess you know Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've been there a couple of times. How did you transition from such a corporate career, if you like, to then becoming a writer and writing memoirs and obviously writing this beautiful book? What was a transition for you?
Okay, so I'm going to take you and your audience back to 1993 when my parents were then living in Miami Beach, Florida, which is pretty far away from New York. My father passed away of an illness in 1993. He had a heart condition, and my brother and I flew down from New York, and we were making arrangements for the funeral. And then a couple of weeks later, my brother and I decided that we were going to sell the condo that they were living in. My mother was already in a nursing home, and she had Alzheimer's at that point. So I went over one night to start making arrangements for the real estate people to come by to take a look at the unit the following day. And as I was straightening up the unit, I went into my father's bedroom, and at the bottom of his night table, I found a manila envelope, and in there were testimonies that my mother and father gave to doctors and attorneys who were petitioning the German courts in Munich, Germany in 1964 for reparations, for the death of their families, the death of my sister, my mother's child, and other relatives who passed away at that time. I didn't know very much about them, Mel, as far as their history. They rarely ever spoke about their experiences. So that night, back in September of 1993, I was sitting through all these papers written both in German and in English about what exactly happened to my parents. It also went into the description of their emotional and physical condition after the war. And as I was reading these documents, I read things I never knew about. And so that was basically the nucleus of my book. If I hadn't found those documents, this book would never have been written. So
that's called divine orchestration, Michael.
Without a doubt. In fact, to this day, my parents are right there with me. When I was writing my book, I'll tell you, Mel, I could feel my parents alongside me. They were filling my ears with words and thoughts. My fingers were running across the keyboard like they had a mind of their own.
I've got goosebumps again. Wow.
It was truly incredible. The next morning I would wake up and I looked down on my computer. I couldn't believe that I wrote that. I didn't remember. It was their writing. So I say this to everybody. This is not my book. This is their book. This is their story. I'm only standing here to speak for them because they should be here speaking, but obviously they're not here. They're not here, but they're here.
Yeah.
So anyway, once I got those documents, I told my brother what happened. He kind of sloughed it off. He's kind of a stoic guy. And I went back to New York. And for a number of years, I just didn't think about it until my brother passed away in 2008, where I became the last surviving member of my family. That's when I realized their story had to be told. And so that's when I went about getting the book started. And then years later, I have now an ebook and a regular book. But I was writing before then, but it was more on a technical level for corporations because my background being in human resources. But I dabbled in poetry and some short stories. But now I'm writing books for people. So I've come a long way since back in the old days.
Yeah.
But it's an incredible story alone, how I found those documents.
And before you sort of tell us more about the story, I know on your bio it says you're very spiritual, you're on your spiritual journey. Has that always been with you? Has that come more as a result of your parents passing, or?
Yeah, well, I'm the grandson of a rabbi.
Right.
And I come from a really conservative Jewish family. My parents are Lithuanian, and they raised us in a rather conservative Jewish home. As I got older, I kind of veered more towards the spiritual part of Judaism, the Kabbalah, and doing a lot of things that were not mainstream Judaism. I consider myself a spiritual person, and I believe we're all God's children. What God made you made me. So it was, we're all together. And that's basically my message, is that the message is that we all have the eternal spirit within all of us. And the way my parents survived was because they tapped into that eternal spirit within them to give them the courage, the love, and the faith to get through one of the most tragic experiences in the human race.
So your sister was actually murdered, was she?
Yes, she was taken away on March 27th, 1944. It was a raid of the apartment buildings in the ghetto. This is not in the concentration camp. And I want to make clear that most of my book takes place in the ghettos, which were all over Europe. This was in the Kovna ghetto in Kaunas, Lithuania. In 1944, and even before that, the Nazi SS would raid the apartment buildings inside the ghetto to take different kind of appliances and money and jewelry off the people in those apartments. And then they would leave. But in March of 1944, they came after the children. This was something that was the first time they were going after the small children under the age of 12. And so my mother was actually, she was underneath the floorboard in her apartment. And this is all in the documents, Mel. I mean, everything I'm saying now is in those, and it's in the book, by the way. Yeah. What I'm saying now is in the book. So they found my mom and my 3.5-year-old sister, Rose Miriam, underneath the floorboard because my father dug a hole underneath the floorboard where they would go and hide as the raids were going on for the number of years. So my father was on work detail because he was working for a German factory outside the ghetto, and the Germans were raiding the building, and my mother and my sister went down into that hole. and they had a carpet and a rug and a table they put over the hole. So when the Germans came into the apartment, they looked around, they couldn't hear or see anything that was suspicious. And as they were ready to walk out, my sister started to murmur, and the Germans took the butt of their rifles and they started tapping on the floor, looking for the hole that they think they thought was underneath the ground. So what happened eventually was they did find it, and they took my mom and my sister out of the hole. And in the book, I talk about the child was literally taken out of my mother's arms.
Yeah.
And my mother was running after the Germans as they were walking out of the apartment, and the German turned around with his butt of his rifle and knocked my mother out cold in the hallway. And Rose was taken along with 1,600 other children. It was called the Kindernacht. It's the children's action. And that day, the next 2 days, over 1,600 children were taken to the extermination building outside of Kaunas, and they were all shot. And so, and what was so, it was obviously a lot of people would have probably never survived that kind of experience, especially with my mother. But only within 3 months from then, Mel, they actually transported my mother and father to separate concentration camps because they were getting ready to liquidate the ghetto. So my mother and father, that's where the vow comes in, because my mother and father made a vow on the train platform before the trains were departing that if either one were to live, they were to go back to the hometown of Kaunas where they first met to see if the other one was still alive. But they didn't know where they were going. All the Germans told them was they were being resettled for their safety. And that was, of course, a lot of nonsense. And so my mother and my aunt went into one set of boxcars heading for Stutthof in northern Poland. And my father and the men and the young boys were sent to Dachau.
Right.
And many died on the train because of the conditions on the train. There was no facilities. Very little air was getting into the boxcars. People were standing like sardines, packed in 200 at a time in a little boxcar. A lot of them died on the way to the camps. It took like 8-9 hours just to travel by train to get to the camps. My mother was going north. My mother was going north west, and my father was going south towards Munich, Germany. And so for 9 months, they didn't see each other.
So let's give them names, David and Dora.
David and Dora Ruskin. And they're my father's, and my last name is really Ruxin, R-U-K-S-E-N. When my parents landed in Ellis Island in New York in 1949, the customs wrote the wrong name on the information. It came out Ruskin. And my father never changed the name. So we grew up and my name is Michael Ruskin. My real name is Meyer Ruxin.
Right. Okay.
You see my birth certificate said, who is this guy? And it's like, my name is Michael Ruskin, but the birth certificate has a whole different name.
I can understand why your dad was happy with that. Do you know what I mean? Staying in.
There's no question. No, because also he was very paranoid about what happened. He didn't want to give this real name, thinking they were still coming after him. So.
Yeah, it makes you wonder as well, Michael, why they needed to take the children. I've got my own theory on that, but I'm not going to go into it. So did you start writing back in 2008, or did that sort of? Yeah, you did.
I started writing in 2008, and initially it turned out to be an ebook that only was online for a very brief time. It was not well written. And I only wanted to get the word out a little bit about my parents, but I took it down within like 3 or 4 months because I wasn't getting much of a play. It was years later, after my brother passed away, that I got serious about writing the book. And I did that because there was a gentleman who turned out to be my second cousin from Johannesburg, South Africa, who found the original ebook, and we met online, and I thought he was some stranger. He turned out to be my second cousin. His grandfather, it was my grandmother's brother.
Right.
And I didn't know this until he got a hold of me, because he found that ebook on some obscure international website for stories of the Holocaust. And when he first wrote to me, I didn't know who he was. And eventually I found out that he had a address book from his aunt, and in that address book were my parents' address and their phone number. I mean, it was well, that's a spiritual thing. I mean, the synchronicity that happens, Mel, when you connect is absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. I could tell you stories that are incredible.
So that was the exact reason why you did the ebook then. It's just amazing, isn't it? So the obviously you talk about how you've obviously told us about what happened with your mom and your sister, and then your mom and dad got separated for 9 months. So what do you sort of you said the book talks more about the ghettos. So what's the sort of do you go into detail about their experience on those different journeys? Yeah.
Right. Well, what happened was when the Germans arrived in Lithuania in 1941, they created a ghetto where they were going to take 36,000 Jews and put them in a south part of the town, which is a very downtrodden town. And the people that were living there, they were moving them out. So you had the people who were living there only total about 8,000 people. 36,000 people were being transported into the ghetto, as the Germans say, for their own safety. And all it was really was a way of controlling the population and exterminating a lot of people.
Yeah.
So my mother and my father got married in 1939, and there's a whole story about how they met. And my father was an electrician, my mother was a school teacher. And then in 1940, my sister was born in Kovna in Kaunas, Lithuania. And that's where they lived for about a year or so before the Germans came in and took them into the ghetto. And there they had a two-bedroom apartment with like 11 people. They were crowded into a slum area. It was just incredible. And they were given rations. They barbed wired the whole area. They weren't allowed to go out. They put a Star of David on the front and back of their clothes. They took all the businesses. They ended up taking everything from them, and they tried to survive as best they could. They would work people. That's what their theory was, or their approach was, to work you to death until you die. They had also what they call selection, where they would take the people into the center part of town, into the center city, the square, and they would examine people to see if they were well enough to work and young enough to work. And they would form a line and they would walk up to the SS and they would examine each person separately, 3-4 hours in line, waiting to walk up to the judge and executioner standing there. Half of them were drunk, these SS. And they would examine each person, and if they were found viable as workers, they would move them to the right. If they were too old or too sickly, they would move them to the left. And of course, the people who went to the left were almost taken away within a day or so.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine standing in line, and this happened regularly. It wasn't just once, it happened a lot, that you were standing in line in front of the Germans being examined to know whether you're going to live or die. And there's a whole story about how my aunt was with my mother, and my mother told my aunt to pinch her cheeks because it gave her some color in her face and make them look like she was healthy. So, I mean, the whole thing goes into a lot of detail about what happened, but you can imagine the terror. People were trying to run out of the line. They were shot almost immediately.
Really? I mean,
that's what
we've seen
premise was different.
Yeah, we've seen like Schindler's List and similar films where you can only try and imagine what it was like, but you had it written down. So you that must have been torturous for you to read all of that.
It was hard. I can't tell you how the hardest chapter for me to write was about the children.
Yeah.
There's a little child, Lena Satterley, who was from Kovna, and she died along with my sister. I found this out by going to the Yad Vashem website in Jerusalem, that she was born and she died almost the exact same time as my sister, and she represents the 1,600 children who passed away during those 2 days in March 27th and 28th of 1944. It was one of the great tragedies of World War II. People rarely talk about it. You know, people talk about the concentration camps, but there was so much killing going on inside those ghettos all over Europe. I mean, when the Germans arrived in Czechoslovakia and Poland and Romania, Yugoslavia, they were killing and not only Jews, they were killing Catholics and other minorities, because they looked at the Aryan race, the German race, as being the master race of the world, and they wanted to make the human race great, as the Germans believed they were, and they wanted to exterminate people they considered to be less than. So it's like a racial thing as well. It was horrible.
Mm. Did you ever get death certificates for your sister? Did they exist?
No.
No.
Well, I know my mother said to me once that she had a little girl, but I didn't really, and this was way back when I was young, I didn't want to press it, because then it would bring back memories that I think I wouldn't want to open those kinds of wounds. I know that she passed away based on the information I got from the documents, and also some research I did at the Yad Vashem and the Holocaust Museum, which, by the way, the Holocaust Museum has those documents in their library. So anyone who visits at the Holocaust in Washington, D.C. will be able to go to the library and read a lot about the documents that are actually in the book.
Okay.
So it was a horrible experience.
Yeah, I mean, like, why do you need to kill children? So the story obviously ripped out the ghetto on their own journeys to wherever the hell they went. So they both went to different concentration camps. And then how did they then get out of the concentration camps?
All right, my mother was liberated by the Russians. They had what they called death marches, where they would march the captives out of the concentration camp and move them into other camps as the Allies, Russians, United States, England, France, were closing in. And so what they would do is they would march them distances away. It could be like on the road for 6-7 days, very little food, no clothes, freezing cold. My mother marched with my with my aunt to the Baltic Sea, which was about 20 miles from the Stutthof concentration camp. And when they were only 2 miles away from the beach, the Russian soldiers came out of the side woods and started shooting the German guards, and they were liberated. And I want to say that if my aunt and my mother would have made it to the beach, they would have been told to get into the ocean. And this was in the freezing cold. And there was a barge about 100 yards away from the beach that they had to swim to get onto the barge, which was taking them to Germany to work in concentration camps in Germany.
Oh, wow.
And so here we got about 500-600 marchers. Many of them died along the way. Many of them who did get to the beach and were told to get into the water to start to swim, the Nazis opened up with their machine guns and they shot them in the ocean. This is all documented in the book, as well as at the Yad Vashem and the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Museum. So my mother was liberated by the Russians, and thank God, because they would not have made it. So there was a firefight going on between the Russians and the Germans, and then my mother was liberated, and then she was sent to a hospital, and it goes on to where she recovered, and I'll go into it a little bit later. My father, on the other hand, had the same process happen, Mel. They were also transported, or actually marched to a concentration camp in Germany, but the Americans who liberated Dachau actually found the marchers on the road, and the Germans dropped their guns. So there was very little skirmishing going on with my father's situation. My mother had a really hard situation. You can imagine walking days and days. They had frostbite. They could hardly walk. This was in the snow. Wow. And a lot of them died right there in the snow. If you didn't stay with the marchers and you dropped to the ground, the Germans would just come out and just shoot you right on the ground. See, these are the things that when I started researching, it was a very difficult book to write, because it was a personal experience my parents had gone through. Yeah. So it was a really hard book to write. And even now, when I talk about it, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's emotional. I know, I can sense it in you. Wow. So
all right. So let me continue. So what happened was, my father was released from the hospital outside of Munich, and he went on what they call his mission. His mission was to go from Munich, Germany, back up to Lithuania to look for my mom. He did not know she was still alive, and she didn't know he was still alive.
Yeah.
So that he mapped out a route through 3 different countries, and this is all in the book. And he would stop along these displacement camps. I'm not sure if your audience know, a displacement camp is where the refugees would go because they had no home. It was either it was totally destroyed, or the Russians came in and took over. They didn't want to go back to communism. So they went to displacement camp waiting to immigrate to the United States, that they needed to have someone who was going to sponsor them to come to the United States. So they had all these displacement camps throughout Germany, France, and a number of other countries. And they had the refugees in these displacement camps. And my father stopped along the way because he didn't know where she was. And so he would stop to see if my mom and my sister were in these displacement camps as he was going back to Lithuania. And I'm not going to go into detail about what happened. Obviously, they reconnected almost 2 months later, because my father, he would travel by foot and picked up by GIs. We take trains and buses, and he would just get himself back up to Lithuania. In Poland is where my mom and dad reunited. The way they reunited is, you'll have to get the book. It's an incredible experience. I mean, I will tell you one thing. I remember my mother had typhus fever. She was only hours away from death. And she was caught in a makeshift Red Cross building. And my mother told me and she was 90 pounds, burning fever. She looked up, she was unconscious. And then for a moment, she became conscious, and they saw my father looking down at her in this cot. And my mother told me that she thought that my dad was an angel who was taking her to heaven. So she said, David, she said, David, are we in heaven? And my father, and of course, my father was just so emotional. He didn't think that she was still alive. And so he said, no, my darling, we're still here, and I'm going to take you home. And so that's how they reunited. But the way they reunited, the way he found her is a story which is absolutely incredible.
And you're not going to share it with me here?
No. Well, I got my ebook, and people can get my book. And by the way, it's not on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I only can get it off my website. I'll tell you the website address.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could. The book is absolutely incredible. And the what happened? They ended up reuniting, and my mother opened up. My mother was a school teacher, and this is also a great story, Mel. When she opened up a school in the displacement camp in Fehrenwald, Germany, right outside of Munich. And there she was honored by dignitaries, including General Dwight D. Eisenhower. And she was honored for her devotion to the children in the camp, who most of them were orphans. My mother spoke 6 languages, so she was able to communicate with all these kids. And she was honored that day. And there's pictures in there of General Eisenhower. I have the only photo. And in front of him is my brother, who was born in Munich, Germany in 1946. And he's in his baby carriage crying. And the general is in back of him with a whole bunch of dignitaries alongside of him. And my brother is in his baby carriage. I imagine a GI must have taken that picture and given it to my father. And I didn't even know that picture existed until I went into their family photo album only a few years ago. And I found this picture of General Eisenhower with my brother.
Wow.
It was absolutely incredible.
I mean, I know your mum and dad, to go through what they went through, you don't want to talk about it, right? Whether they ever talked between themselves, only they know. But for you to, for you not to know all of this while they were still alive must be, do you ever feel a little bit frustrated that they didn't speak to you? Or is it just a case of, well, do you know what? No, yeah.
Mel, that's the whole purpose of my book.
Yeah.
This book I dedicated to them. It's a legacy that needs to be honored and preserved. And in a way, I feel that I let them down for not really appreciating what they did for my brother and I, and the terrible tragedy they went through. I could remember sitting in the den when I was 12, 13 years old. My parents were sitting alongside of me watching The World at War, which is a documentary showing the Germans taking away all the people. I couldn't connect what I was watching on that TV screen to the two people that were on my right. I could not connect that. And so it's tragic. Listen, they know I'm here and they know I'm doing, as their son, I'm doing everything I can. As you know, I'm in Europe now, my book's in Europe and also in the United States. That I'm doing everything I can to keep their legacy alive, and that people need to honor them, preserve them for what the experiences they had gone through. And so at my age, I'm already not like a spring chicken. I'm doing everything I can. I put in a ton of work to make sure people know about what happened to my parents, because they really never spoke about it, nor did I even want to know that much, primarily because here I was born in the United States. I wanted to go out and play baseball and hang around with the kids in the candy store. I was an American. My parents were European. They went through the war. They spoke to me in Yiddish until I was 7 years old. So I didn't speak a word of English until I got into the second or third grade. So when I spoke Yiddish. When my parents didn't want me to know anything, they would speak in Hebrew, so my brother and I wouldn't know what they were saying. So it was a whole different culture, and I really couldn't connect with that part of their life. And also, they never spoke about it.
Yeah,
they never spoke about it.
Yeah.
And that's just very typical.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you haven't, excuse me, that you haven't spoken about in the book that you'd like to speak about?
Okay, so I just want people to recognize the strength of the human spirit we have within us, all of us. And I say this to my audience when I speak to them in front of an audience. I say, if they had the capacity to go within themselves and their love for each other and their faith and their courage, they would never have survived. So here are my parents who lost their child, who lost their parents, and they were still able to get through such trauma. Then if they were able to do it, everybody in that room could do the same thing if they go within and connect to that spiritual side of them. And that's what I leave my audience with, that they should walk out of that room knowing that they are able to do the same thing. Any circumstance, any tragedy they face, they know that God is with them, within themselves. They have the answers along with God helping them.
Yeah.
So that is the main message I leave my audience with.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful one, and one I certainly believe in. It's funny, my son, even though I think he's spiritual, he denounces it all, but he's a wise old soul. And he says, sometimes, Mum, I wish I did have, this faith, this belief in something bigger than me. He said, because I get why people have got it. He said, and it's a dark, lonely place when you don't have that, right? In terms of when you're struggling yourself. So yeah, that's beautiful. By the way, you said you can only get it from your website. Is it in Kindle version as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's give the website. It's the Vow that's VOW, the Vow a Lovestory.com.
Yeah.
That is my website. You can go on there, get the ebook, the Kindle book. It's not on audio yet. That's going to happen. You can get the ebook or the regular book. But of course, over in Europe, the shipping would be, most of the people that order my book in Europe are getting the ebook because it's very expensive, because it's a pretty good sized book.
Yeah.
And there's also information on there. I'm doing, as I said, I'm doing memoirs for people too, but most of that is happening here in the States. But yeah, they can all go there. As I said, it's not on Barnes and Noble and it's not on Amazon. People go over there and they say, where's the book? Although I'm number 6 in Google as top as far as Holocaust love story, I'm number 6 in the world as far as the book ranking in Google. But you can go onto my website, thevowalovestory.com, and you can get your book there, or the ebook.
Is there a particular reason why it's not on Amazon? Because I would imagine that would open up your audience.
Yes, it would, but they tend to have very tight control, and they could raise and drop the price any way they want. You'll talk to a lot of self-published authors who do not go on those on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, because they take an incredible amount of money to run that. And I have ways of creating a lot of exposure, both here in Europe as well as here in the States. And, it's just not very economically feasible for me to go on Amazon. It's other things. I like control of my book. I autograph each copy, Mel, and I've sold thousands. Every book that goes out, and I go to the post office and I get every day I go to the post office with my books. And
Wow.
each one is autographed, each one. And I sold thousands. And because it's almost like it's I never had children. So to
Right.
me, that book is like my child. And so
Yeah.
I just don't want to give it out. I don't want to just give it to Amazon. This is me, you know?
Yeah.
So I decided that I'm going to do this from the beginning to the end. I'm going to hold on to it.
Amazing. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Um, so the website is The Vow, a Love Story.
TheVowALoveStory.com. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll put that in the show notes, obviously, and any other links that you want to provide. I don't know if you use Instagram or Facebook or anything like that.
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to finish these conversations with anything you feel called to share, anything at all, Michael.
Well, I believe, first of all, you have to have purpose in life. You've got to get up every day and feel like you're doing something for yourself as well as for mankind. The love for yourself is number one, and number two is the love you give to others. And I think and we're all in the same boat. I mean, we're all connected. And what I'm seeing now in the world is division.
Yeah.
And that's very, very scary. I spoke to the Ukraine about 3 weeks ago. It's horrible over there. And I'm seeing this all around. Even in the United States, there's so much division going on. And that's not the way is going to make mankind evolve. It's just going to make it worse. So you've got to find ways to educate people who don't, because we get a lot of Holocaust deniers, people who said it never happened. And I confront those all the time. You've got to try to educate people and make them and actually give them an understanding of what happened. But the most important thing is to love and to have a spiritual connection and have the courage to go forward and get out of your comfort zone. That's another way. You have to grow. And the way you grow is doing things that you're not accustomed to. That's how you grow. And that's what I'm doing now. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and learn more about David and Dora. I mean, what a life, and how lucky are they to have a son that is basically sharing their story with the world. And I wish you all the best on your self-publishing, self-promoting, the control you've got. And I get it, it's like your baby, and you don't want to give up control. And why would you? Because so many people do. And I understand the big corporates, they're buggers, let's be honest.
Right.
So I applaud you for that. Fair play to you, standing by your integrity and by your values.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing yours and their story. It's going to be so inspirational for my listeners. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Mel. Good luck. Thank you. All right.
So we stopped recording, and then Michael starts telling me about Wahin Phoenix. I don't know. I've never known how to pronounce that guy's name. The Hollywood actor, and the fact that this story is being looked at and being picked up for a potential miniseries film. And how do you pronounce his name? Wahin, is it?
Yeah, it starts with a J.
Yeah, it's like Spanish, Phoenix. Isn't it? Wahin Phoenix, River Phoenix, yeah. Brother. So you take over, Michael. Tell me what you were just telling me.
All right. So basically, when people read my book, they come back on Facebook and they start asking me, when is the movie coming out? When is the movie coming out? I said, I don't know. I know there are people out in LA that are possibly looking at it. So I wanted Mel to know that, well, there is another producer out there that is looking at my book who produced Die Hard and another film with Mel Gibson. But Joaquin Phoenix, who did the Joker, did a number of films. He has my book right now, and it was given to him from his sister, who's friends with my friend, and my friend who read the book gave it to her to this lady, and she ended up sending it to her brother, which is Joaquin Phoenix. So now I'm waiting for them to possibly get back to me. I don't know, but I'm saying I have a funny suspicion based that LA knows about my book. And I've gotten a few that were interested, but they said that because I haven't sold as many books as to make a film, and my name basically is an unknown. I only came on the scene over the last year or so. And to produce a World War II film about my parents under those conditions is going to cost an incredible amount of money. So they said once this book sees to really pick up, they'll probably go back and possibly look at a miniseries or something beyond that on HBO or Showtime or Netflix. So, but that's not the purpose was my book. But now to have this happen, it's like, it's just amazing. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? There may be a film.
Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about my friend in Hollywood, who's actually a writer and producer, and he's an avid history. He just reads everything. So this is right up his street. So I'm going to share your website with him as well, and just say it's being looked at, because he also is in the industry. So who knows, right? So
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
Right. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you, and good luck to you.